In my brief here, it now says, Robin, to sum up the day in 5 minutes, which feels like an impossible task. So I will, do anywhere near justice to such a wide-ranging and exciting day. It's been really, really interesting, particularly the variation. This morning, those of you who've been here all day, we obviously kicked off with Rebecca, my colleague Rebecca Sudworth, talking a bit about FSA's policy and our programme on food hypersensitivity. You had to put up with me rabbiting on for a while about science and evidence in that space. Hopefully it wasn't too awful. But, slightly more seriously, it does really, I think, a key message that we've heard throughout the day actually is the important role that science holds here, both in things like determining allergens, identifying allergens, in potentially treatments for people with allergens, but also in that evidence base about what goes onto a label, how do you understand how people, consumers behave in retail or in hospitality, and how do we put all of that together to make the world a safer place, I guess, for people with hypersensitivities. You heard from Adam this morning a fascinating story about the clinical end of allergy, and in particular areas around tolerizing therapies, for example. In the Q&A afterwards, those of you who were there will have heard some really interesting dialogue around what may or may not be achievable, particularly thinking about childhood to adulthood allergies, and some very good cautionary words, I think, about what is and is not safe to try at home. And then Rebecca Nibb gave a great overview about the huge impact that hypersensitivities have on people's quality of life. Something that many of you listening, I'm sure, experience on a day-to-day basis. Everything from taking much longer to do your weekly shop than those without allergies, to obviously the kind of shadow that hangs over people when they go out for dinner, and always that question about, how do you get the information you need to make safe choices? Then after lunch, of course, the session we've just had has looked at much more at the practical side of things, and many thanks to all of you who, on the panel this afternoon, who talked about everything from implementing this in schools to dealing with inspections in food businesses and the kind of commercial end of producing safe products for consumers that are clearly labelled. We've had, everything from multilingual resources that Dilys, that you mentioned, to Ashley, your really interesting insights, and thanks for sharing those from Greg's perspective about allergen management. And I think one thing I would particularly point out was your point you made about this being a non-competitive area for business. Really critical here that we all work together and share best practice. No one gains from competition in this area. We all gain from working together, and I think that's a really good message to have. And then of course Sarah and Maggie, really fascinating, particularly for those of us who have now or have had or may have in the future kids at school. This idea of how you implement this in schools in a way that is not discriminatory, that is not about hanging labels around people and making them sit on their own at a separate table, but still makes that environment safe. And particularly the area you flagged at the end there about choice and maintaining choice. It's not about making life safe by saying to somebody you can eat this meal and nothing else. It's about how do we make people's as integrated as possible into what is essentially normal school life. We've had absolutely loads of questions all day in both sessions, and have not, I'm afraid, been able to answer all of them. But it's been very interesting to see recurrent themes, and in particular that I think that integration between kind of policy and science and the consumer perspective, and particularly really useful points that we've been taking note of at FSA about things that we might be able to do better, areas where we might be able to lean in a little bit and stimulate the conversation. For instance, that last question about tech and labelling and data, that the point that I think Sarah, you made about a label is not very good if you're short-sighted or blind, for example. You need to have some other mechanism of communicating that. A QR code or a website that tells you everything is fantastic, unless you're someone who doesn't own a smartphone or a computer, in which case it's totally pointless. So I think that understanding of the full diversity of consumers is really critical. And in particular, I think the other thing I would pick out from all the sessions, but particularly that last one, was the need not to be blinkered about this, not to say, okay, for instance, here are 14 allergens, let's not worry about anything else. We know there are plenty of other things out there which people are allergic to. Just like this idea of the kind of waiver that one of the questioners raised, it's no good to divide the world into black and white. Yes, allergies controlled. No, it's not. It's about thinking about the full range and the full diversity of hypersensitivities that are out there, and the full range of tools at our disposal for dealing with those. That is in no way a suitable or appropriate summary of the day, I'm afraid. I can't possibly wrap up hours of excellent presentations into 4 minutes, but I hope it's going to give those of you who haven't been able to join us for the whole thing a snapshot of what you missed. Most of the content will be available online, so if you did miss stuff, or indeed if you want to recap, please do go back and have another look. So it remains to me just to do two things, which is to thank, in particular, the organisers and Glasgow's event team who've helped us put this together. I'm not going to tempt fate by saying it's been flawless on the IT front, but if I make it to the end of this sentence, and it has, then many thanks indeed for a great delivery of this online platform. And of course, last of all, to say that this is not an end, this is the start of a conversation and what will happen after today. So we're going to be reporting the key findings from this event on our website, and that will remain live on the platform for about 3 months. So there's a long time for those of you who are registered to come back and have a look at it. In the next 24 hours time, you'll be able to access all the recordings from the session, so please come back and do have a look again at stuff you might have missed or stuff you want to recap on. There's still time to visit the virtual exhibition stands if you haven't already. You've got another about 3/4 of an hour for that. And last but not least, a huge thanks to all of our speakers who've given up their time today to come and speak, and to all of you who've dialed in to listen to this. We hope you've learned a lot. We hope it's stimulated some interesting thoughts. And as ever, of course, if you do have questions or concerns, please do reach out to us at the FSA contact points, and we will be delighted to answer your questions or put you in touch with relevant people who can. On that note, just about on time, I hope, I will draw this to a close with a great round of virtual applause to all our speakers, and my thanks to all of you who participated. Many thanks, and I look forward to seeing you at the next online event.